It's time for the No Nonsense Roundtable. Insights to capture your imagination from people you know and people you'd like to know about. Each week, a different guest from a different walk of life. Now, here is the host of the No Nonsense Roundtable, Dom Genova.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition of the No Nonsense Roundtable. I'm Dom Genova, your host, every Saturday right here on News Radio M 1180. And I'd like to remind everybody you can get the past shows on NoNonsenseRoundtable.com. So I'm here today with somebody everybody knows. It's our district attorney, Sandra Doorley. Well, welcome to my studio.
It is great to be here. And I have to say, this is a wonderful studio. Too bad your listeners couldn't see just how beautiful it is.
Well, maybe someday we'll do this in video or whatever, but then again, they would have to see me, which, I don't know. They say, what, a voice for radio and a face to match? Is that
It'd be okay. It'd be okay. Trust me. Trust me. Yeah.
So welcome back. The last time you were on, it was like 212 shows ago. It was you were my third guest way back when, and welcome back. It's good to see you.
Well, it's great to be back. We were looking at that. It was quite a while ago.
Yeah, a lot of water under the bridge since then. COVID and certainly our view of the world has changed a bit, and the economy has changed, and the international affairs have changed quite a bit. But let's refresh everybody a little bit about Sandra Doorley. Now, tell me a little bit about your path and where you were born and where you went to school.
Sure. You know, I love to bring that up because I was born and raised in Sleepy Hollow, New York. Okay. And it's down in Westchester County. And I went to Sleepy Hollow High School, where our mascot was the Headless Horseman. And it's really fun. And every Halloween, it literally turns into Halloween Town. And I love to go down there and just, get wrapped up in everything. It's fun. Mm-hmm.
So somebody culturally appropriated headless people. Is that what that was?
Exactly, that old Hessian soldier.
Yeah. Can't be too careful these days. So exactly. So where'd you go to school and for what?
Right. So I went to SUNY Albany for my undergrad, and I did the political science and the history major with a minor in English. And, I loved college. I got involved in politics a little bit back then. And during college, I thought, I think I'd like to be a lawyer. Mm-hmm. So I started to explore that. And after, graduating from college, I went to Syracuse University College of Law. Oh, great. Yeah. Now, you say you were involved in politics. What was the first political campaign you were involved in? It was really interesting because, Albany is the hotbed of politics. Mm-hmm. And they would come to the university and they would want college students to be poll watchers. They would want us to, go out and hand out literature and do things like that. I remember there was one county court judge, and I was along with my roommate, and we were just, going out and assisting him in his campaign.
Okay. Now, so it sounds like you were interested in politics even when you were a small child, right?
Exactly. I get back to the first time I ever got involved in a political campaign. I was in grammar school, and again, he was a congressman, and he was running in the Westchester County area. And again, it was just standing outside of the polling areas in the legal area and handing out literature. So I guess I've always had kind of politics in my blood.
And what's the first office you ran for?
The first one was, in college. No. I actually did.
No, yeah. You didn't start out by being DA for,
Exactly. Yeah. My first campaign was for student council while I was at SUNY Albany. I was the Dutch Quad representative. I remember that.
Dutch Quad representative.
Dutch Quad.
Did you have a theme for your campaign?
No, but I remember, doing a really cool, calligraphy, poster, and then I would go around and I'd stick it in dorm rooms, and it was kind of fun.
Yeah, so it's in your blood.
Yeah.
Well, now you have to be elected to be the DA in Monroe County, but not every community has an elected district attorney, right?
In some states, no.
Some states, no.
Right. But in New York, there are 62 of us, and we are all elected every 4 years.
Well, it begs a question. I mean, there was a political candidate just recently said, when I get into office, I'm going to fire district attorneys that don't agree with me. And say, you really can't do that, right?
You really can't do that. I think there is a way to get them removed if they're not following, their duties. I mean, we're sworn to uphold the Constitution and the Constitution of, the state of New York. But essentially, the electorate, you fire us.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are claim to be able to do these superpowers when they're running for office. They really can't do. I mean, we kind of know that, and there's a little bit of puffery, let's say, when some people campaign, and there's some things that are just absolutely not true. So tell me about campaigning. And do you like campaigning or not campaigning or?
Well, I think the best part about campaigning is being able to engage with the community, because often, in my role as a prosecutor, and again, this is my 32nd years of being a prosecutor in Monroe County, you deal with, the cases that come before your desk and the people who were involved in the case. But when you're running for office and when you're able to, be political, you're talking more to the community. And I get to meet so many people from so many walks of life. And, one of my favorite things is telling people in Rochester and in Monroe County what we actually do in the district attorney's office, because a lot of them don't understand the role.
Well, let's go there. Let's tell people about what you do and how you do it. I mean, how many people you have working for you, what your cases are like, what your case load is like. Go ahead.
Right. And I think that's one of the most shocking things when I tell people, I run one of the largest law firms in, Rochester and in Monroe County. Currently, we have about 160 people working in the office. I have the capacity to have 90 attorneys working. We have we're around 80, a little over 80 right now. So I do have openings, but it's really a large law firm. And, we are the ones who prosecute all the criminal matters that occur within the county, not just the city of Rochester, but, any town or village court, any criminal matter. We are the ones that prosecute that. We're not the ones that make the arrests.
Right.
I know some people, think, oh, why didn't you, make that arrest? Why aren't you charging, this person with, so-and-so? For the majority of the cases, it's law enforcement that makes the arrest, and they give the cases to our office. And then depending on the type of case, it's assigned to an assistant district attorney, and it's their, duty to prosecute that and make sure that justice is served.
Did you say you had openings for attorneys?
We do.
Really?
Yeah. I was talking to a group the other day, and I was there actually, with members of law enforcement and with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I know this is also true for our public defender's office, but a lot of us are short. We're short-staffed. There doesn't seem to be the want and the desire for people to be in law enforcement these days. And I think that's really a shame.
But it sounds like a rewarding career. I mean, at the end of the day, you've done some good by, putting somebody away that needs to be put away. Exactly.
And you know what? I wouldn't have been doing it for 32 years if I didn't think that way.
Mm-hmm.
There's, you look at the job. I say we're there to make sure that justice is served.
Right.
And people may say, "Oh, that's so cliche," but it's not, because justice isn't always like locking someone up.
Mm-hmm.
I am a true believer in, diversion courts and giving people a second chance. But, you've got to look at each case on its own merits.
We're about ready to get into a break, but the diversion thing is something I want to pick up on when we get back.
Certainly.
Well, welcome back. You're listening to No Nonsense Roundtable today with Sandra Doorley, our Monroe County District Attorney. Now, you said something before the break, and I never heard the word before, is diversion court, right?
That's correct. In Monroe County, we have, many diversion courts. We have, starting off with drug courts. We've got drug courts. We've got opioid stabilization court. We have our judicial diversion part. Those deal with, drug users who are arrested, and they may be arrested for small amounts of drugs, narcotics, marijuana, whatever, or they may be committing their crime because of their drug addiction. So, again, you've heard this, you can't arrest your way out of crime. So in those particular cases, we want to, if the person's record is, if the record is correct, we want to make sure that we can give them help and we get them into a diversion court. Oftentimes we see people committing crimes because they have a mental illness. We have a mental health court where we can get people stabilized and get them on the right medication and make sure that they're on the right track, because we don't want to prosecute someone who's suffering from a mental illness. We want to get them help. We've got a veterans court. Oftentimes we deal with veterans who have PTSD from whatever, situation they were placed in, and we want to make sure that we can get them help. We want to make sure that we can hook them up with the appropriate resources and keep them out of the criminal justice system because of what they've done for our country. So we want to make sure that we can give them that help. So for the right case with the right defendant, diversion courts can be very, very helpful.
And I think a lot of people don't have an idea that those even exist. So what you're doing is you're kind of triaging your arrests, right? Exactly.
If you think about the number of arrests that, or the cases that come into our office, it's been typically around 4,000 to 5,000 felonies a year, and anywhere, give or take, 1,000, about 15,000 misdemeanors. The numbers may have been lower over the last couple of years, but that's a large number of cases that come through our office. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the realities, we can't bring every one of those to trial, and it's not appropriate for us to do that. We want to look at each case. We want to look at the defendant. We want to look at the defendant's record. We want to look at whether this will affect public safety in some ways. But if there's a way that we can get that person help, then we have to refer them to a diversion court. And then the flip side, as I say to everyone, but you know what, for violent offenders, I look at things differently, because my responsibility is to make sure that our streets are as safe as they can be. So if people are arrested for violent felonies, especially ones that are, committing murders, that are, robbing people, committing serious assaults, and those who are carrying around loaded firearms, I want to make sure that we prosecute those individuals and make sure that they can't hurt anyone in society. It's just so important that we do justice in each and every case. And again, justice could mean a diversion court. Justice could mean, giving someone community service. But justice also means making sure that victims are made whole and society is prevented from experiencing that type of harm again. There needs to be consequences to actions, and I think that's sometimes what we're lacking in this community. And I think that's also why, some people, make a mockery of the criminal justice system because they don't feel like, there are going to be consequences, but there needs to be. And, you think about, families when you're raising your children, there's your child misbehaves, there's a consequence to that action. And by having consequences, you're ultimately making sure that the environment that we're in, whether it be the community, whether it be your household, that you're safe. And that's really what we strive to do. We want to, make sure that we are providing justice in each and every case. We're wanting to make sure that, we support victims, and we want to make sure that the most violent of the offenders are taken off the streets, because we want to really make sure that people, when they go home at night, that they're safe, that they don't have to, did I lock my car door? Did I lock the front door? We want to make sure that people are safe in their homes and that they can, live their lives, not with this intrusion of crime, that they are safe in their environment.
Crime has been on people's minds lately. Are we less safe than we used to be?
I think public safety is looked at differently.
Okay.
Now. I really do. If you look at our numbers, I think our numbers intake, they're slightly down, but I don't think that means that crime is down. I think, as I said before, people don't want to join law enforcement. I think the number of police officers, they're certainly down. I don't think we have as many police officers patrolling. I don't think arrests are being made. And in that way, I think that we aren't as safe as we were. Look at around. When kids are bringing guns into schools, when you can't even go through a drive-through without worrying that you're going to be carjacked. And last year we had the highest number of homicides committed in the city of Rochester. So no, we are not safe.
Is this a result of a change in laws, bail reform, less is more, all that stuff that we hear going on in the public, and we're really not as aware as we should be?
I think it's a combination of all of it. Especially in Rochester, you have to look at what's happened here in the last few years. We were struck with COVID. We experienced a tragedy with Daniel Prude. That really, I think, set the city on edge. And yes, at the same time, we have these sweeping criminal justice reforms where everything was enacted, with one fell swoop of a pen, and we weren't able to really adjust to it as quickly as possible. And then you've got less is more, where people on parole are being released earlier and they're being released into the community. So in 2022, of the murders that were committed in 2022, approximately 20 to 25% of them were committed by individuals out on parole.
Is there a resistance on the part of people in Albany to address and change these things? Is that part of the problem?
I think part of the problem is that they never talk to the stakeholders to begin with. That's part of the problem. Everyone believed that there should have been some kind of bail reform. I mean, nobody wants anyone sitting in jail, because they can't, make a $50 bail. We don't want to punish someone because of poverty. Absolutely not. But we needed to make smart and wise choices. And I think in order to do that, you needed to speak to the stakeholders. I mean, we see it each and every day. Law enforcement sees it each and every day.
Well, I have this expression. I think the worst law in the world is the law of unintended consequences. I get it that maybe somebody who has a few ounces of marijuana on them shouldn't be held in jail until they can make their bail. I mean, I got that. But on the other hand, you're letting people go that, I guess, what is it? The judges don't have the discretion to hold them, right?
Well, bail, the true sense of bail is that bail ensures a person's return to court. Mm-hmm. You can't consider anything else. I mean, there are other, qualifications and criteria that you can look at, but essentially bail is to make sure a person returns to court. And with the new change in the criminal justice reform, that's what they really concentrated on. You could never hold someone because they are dangerous to the community.
Are you seeing an increase in people that just don't return to court? I mean, obviously, if you let somebody on a low bail and they don't live in the state, let's say, they're not coming back, are they? They're
not coming back. And, I can tell you with certainty that now with the increase in appearance tickets where people do not have to, show up to court, they're given an appearance ticket at the site of the crime. The police officer will give them an appearance ticket and say, okay, you have to show up within 20 days. I can't tell you how many of those people just don't even show up, and how many cases that we are not able to prosecute because they never return themselves to a court.
Well, that begs another question. I mean, that encourages somebody who's their buddy, their friend, somebody that they know doing the same thing because they know there's no consequences to it, right?
Exactly. And then, that brings this whole conversation full circle. You say, what's happening? There aren't consequences to actions, and we have to make sure that people are held accountable for what they do. And I believe with some aspects of criminal justice reform that there are no consequences for actions.
And I guess that's the crux of the whole matter, that if there's no consequences, then there's going to be an increase in whatever. There's going to be an increase in thefts, and there's going to be an increase in violent crimes and whatever. We're about ready to head into a news break, but this is really fascinating stuff. And I want to see when we get back about your view of resources that maybe you don't have, that you need, and an answer to maybe some questions about the thing on most people's minds, these murders and guns. So we'll talk about that right after this. Well, welcome back to the No Nonsense Roundtable. We're talking to Sandra Doorley, our district attorney here from Monroe County. And not every question I have is a serious question. So let's start with this. TV shows, favorite law enforcement TV show, what is it?
Oh, Law and Order, of course. I loved it.
If nothing, it's the music at the beginning.
Well, I have to confess, I did at one point have the soundtrack, the little jingle as my ringtone on my phone.
Yeah, and everybody knows that. The marketing on that is just absolutely wonderful. Everybody knows what that is. So, so we'll go to a serious question. The thing about guns these days, I mean, they're just rampant, and I mean, there is like no solution to this, is there? I mean,
yeah, no. And we have seen such an increase in gun crime in this community. If you look at a criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree, that charge alone, that means that you are stopped and you are in possession of an illegal gun. You don't have a permit. You are, carrying an illegal loaded firearm. Last year in 2022, we had more than we have ever had. It was over 600 of those cases that come into our office. And, what do you do with them? I could tell you, sometimes people are carrying guns for their protection, even though they don't have, they're not, adequately licensed to do so. But what are we going to do? So, we look at our gun crimes part. We have several parts of our gun crimes program where, if it's someone who doesn't have a record and they are actually contributing to society, we're not going to send them to state prison. We're going to put them on some kind of interim probation or swift, certain, and fair, which is a program where we actually monitor them. They're on electronic home confinement for 6 months. We make sure that we get them into the appropriate areas that they may be lacking. Some may not have the education. Some may, need treatment. Some may need job skills, things like that. So, in those types of cases, we want to make sure we're helping people. But people that, have a gang history, who after we do some research, we know that they're causing the violence in our areas, even though that particular case may not have involved the shooting or a homicide, we want to make sure that, we take them off the streets and send them to state prison, because we can't be walking around, with people that are just, it's so easy to pull the trigger. And that's the violence that we're seeing. I support the Second Amendment. I support the right to carry firearms, but the way firearms are used in our city, people are not thinking of the consequences of their actions. They're not thinking about what happens when they pull the trigger. They're just too quick to act.
Well, I mean, people have these fantasy ideas like you're going to be able to go confiscate everybody's gun, which would work if you could do it, but you can't do it.
You can never do that. Or you never.
Because,
yeah.
And people go, why? Because it's in the Constitution that you can have one.
Absolutely.
And that's been the argument with abortion. There's no abortion provision in the Constitution, but there is a provision for firearms in the Constitution. So you do have a federal right to have a gun.
Exactly.
But to your point, not everybody that has a gun that's carrying around a weapon is there trying to do harm either.
And that's correct. You look at the big question: is this a legal gun owner, or is this someone carrying an illegal gun? Clearly, the Second Amendment supports legal gun owners, and I support them as well. Then you look at the illegal gun, the person who's possessing the illegal gun. What are they using it for? Is it someone who's got a record and someone who has history of violence? Then that person needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent. Is it someone with no record whatsoever, and maybe they are carrying it for protection? In that case, we want to make sure that we can put that person or hook that person up with the right resources through interim probation or, again, the swift, certain, and fair program.
Somebody in law enforcement said once that a lot of times we know who did this. Is that
that's absolutely true, because you have to remember, there's a burden in what we do. We, as prosecutors, our burden is proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
So when we present a case to, a jury or to a judge in a bench trial, our burden is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's a pretty high burden. It's not proof beyond a shadow of a doubt, but it's not, hey, yeah, the person probably did it. We've got to show evidence. So yeah, when you look at the unsolved crimes, I could tell you probably the majority of cases, the police officers know who did it, but they don't have the proof.
I don't have the proof.
They don't have the proof.
Well, I can tell from the look in your eyes. I mean, that I just touched on something.
Right. I mean, I could tell you there's a lot of unsolved homicides where, we probably know who did it, but we don't have the proof to bring it to court. And that's part of our system. I mean, that's, when you're talking about, someone is going to be, their liberty is going to be taken away from them. They could possibly be, put in prison for a very long time. There needs to be a bar. We have to meet a certain threshold, and that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And if it's not there, then we shouldn't go forward.
And you're absolutely right. But that means that there are a lot of people out there that and from experience, and that fella X is going after fella Y because fella Y did something to X's, friend or whatever, and you do know, but you can't do anything about it. That's gonna be frustrating as anything.
It is, but sometimes the street plays out itself.
Okay, let's go with that.
Let's just leave it at that.
No. I guess there's something to be said between the lines on that. So what is reality? Human nature is human nature. And I guess I know what you're saying without you actually having to say it. So we're getting to the point where we're talking about something that needs to change. Something has changed. Now you're without resources. It's like any other business. If you don't have the staff and then you don't have the people back in the office to support the staff, the quality suffers. Okay. So right now you're saying that you don't have enough police.
We don't have enough police.
And you don't have enough prosecutors.
We don't have enough prosecutors. And I can tell you, we don't have enough public defenders. We don't have enough probation officers. We don't have enough parole officers. Everyone within the system, they're all experiencing this same shortage. Mm-hmm. And it's got to change. You think about this. If you want to, eliminate police, just think, we're living in a society with no police. You're not going to ever eliminate crime.
Right.
And again, if you eliminate prosecutors, people are still going to commit crime. Who is going to, prosecute those individuals and hold them accountable? Mm-hmm. There are so many intricate pieces of the system, and we have to exist all together.
Right. I had Todd Baxter on the show a few months ago, and he explained that you need fire trucks and you need fire prevention both. Exactly.
There would be no need for defense attorneys if there weren't prosecutors.
Right.
If you think of it that way.
Well, and the system is being strained while crime is increasing because of a greater availability of guns. And it's got to be a big challenge for you. Now, where are these guns coming from? Are they coming from other states, They're coming from all over. They're coming from other states. They're coming in from, outside the country. They're homegrown in Rochester. There's community guns that people can put their hand on if they need it. It's all over. And it seems to be harder to get a hold of a gun permit legally. Is that pretty much true?
It is now that there are. I believe you have to take additional classes and show that you're worthy of carrying a firearm, and it's not as easy as it used to be. Yeah. And I know a lot of people complain that they have their pistol permit, and it's been it takes so long to actually get the permit or application. Yeah.
Well, we're about ready to head to another break, and we'll see you right after this. Well, welcome back. You're listening to No Nonsense Roundtable, and guest today is Sandra Doorley, our district attorney for Monroe County. And from talking to you, this is sort of like analogous to there's a cleanup that needs to be done. There's a responsibility that you have. You are given the charge of keeping us safe and whatever. And, management just hasn't given you the tools and the resources that you need. And it's got to be frustrating as all heck. If you were to wave a magic wand, what would you like to see? What would you like to have? What resources do you think that we as a public should be pressing our legislators for?
Wow. My bucket list would be tremendous. But, one of the things that I feel most frustrated on is, honestly, the lack of prosecutors. And if we had more attorneys and we could have actually a case cap, some of my attorneys are dealing with, starting off with misdemeanors, a couple hundred, maybe close to 500 to 1,000 cases at one time. It's really hard to do the justice that is deserved when you have so many cases. When you talk about, the attorneys who deal with our special investigations, guns and drugs, there are so many cases coming in that I wish we could put a cap on them. Maybe they only had to deal with 50 cases at one time. That's not what they're dealing with. They're dealing with hundreds of cases. And sometimes it's overwhelming. If I could bring more attorneys in and, pay them better and have them really, be invested in each and every case and give it the time that we need, I think we would be able to provide better justice in each and every case. It's just so frustrating when you think about the number of cases. I said, about 4,000 to 5,000 felonies. That's a lot of cases that come into our office. And, you really have to spend a lot of time on them. Now with the advent of body-worn cameras, there could be, say for, a traffic stop, they arrest a defendant and there's a firearm that's found. Sometimes there could be 4 police officers who respond at the scene. And, we really need to make sure that we watch every single body-worn camera. It takes more time now to prepare a case and know exactly what occurred than it did, maybe 5 years ago. Body-worn cameras, you need to watch everything because we want to make sure we're check and balance on the police. There's no disputing that. We want to make sure that everything that they do with that encounter with the defendant, that they are doing it according to the law and according to the Constitution. Now we have to watch all this body-worn camera footage. We didn't have to do that 5 years ago. There's so much more that we have to do for each particular case now that I really need, money to pay people to be career prosecutors. I need more paralegals who are going to help us gather all of that information, all that body-worn camera footage, the blue light cameras, all of the information that now we have for a particular case. That would be my wish list.
So the mistrust of the police department has compelled more use of body cameras, which is not just one camera at an arrest. It could be 4, which gives you the burden of watching each one of those, which makes the prosecutor's job even harder.
Exactly.
And it's a consequence that nobody provided for.
Exactly. You think of one of the cases that I'm currently prosecuting, the death, the shooting death of Officer Mazurkowicz. Mm-hmm. Now, I want you to think about how many police units were there when Officer Mazurkowicz was shot and killed. Think about that. Dozens. And I wanted to make sure that I watched every single body camera from start to finish because I didn't know, was it going to tell me about a piece of information that may have escaped a police report? Was there, a statement that could have been made, an identification procedure, just anything that I would need, a piece to the puzzle to put it all together. The magnitude of that case alone. You could have 3 prosecutors working full time on nothing but that case.
And you're not saying that body cameras are a bad thing. You're just saying that it is something that now is in the scope of what you have to do, but have not gotten the resources to help you do that.
Right. I think body-worn cameras are great, but it's a piece of evidence. And like every piece of evidence, you've got to review it and you've got to be comfortable with it and you've got to know it in order to have it be part of the case.
Okay, so at this point in the show, I call it the retail part of the show. So what makes Sandra Doorley a good DA?
Attention to details. I love being the district attorney. I love being, the CEO of the office, the managing partner, if you will, of my own law firm. But deep down inside of me, I'm a prosecutor and I'm a prosecutor at heart. Whenever I have a case, and right now I have 3 homicides that I'm prosecuting, and I actually cover Wheatland Town Court. That's what I started with back in 1992. That's my happy place. I love delving into the cases. I love watching the body-worn cameras. I love putting the case together. That's what I do. That's my passion. At the end of the day, the most important role of a prosecutor is to really get justice for victims of crime. So often, victims aren't really thought about in the criminal justice system. They are, cast aside. And if you look at the criminal justice reforms that were just enacted, very little was very little focus on the victims. We have to make sure that we make these individuals whole. We are encountering them in the worst day of their life. And, the best thing that we could do is, help them through the process, help them through the trial, whether it's a homicide, if it's, their loved one was murdered, we're seeing them at the worst time of their life, but we have to work and make sure that we bring them justice, and we have to, be compassionate. We have to help them and make them understand what's involved in the criminal justice system. And at the end of the day, when we can, bring justice to victims and victims' families and be their support, because we're the only ones that really support them, then we've done our job.
So what can we do as private citizens to help you?
You always have to remember that in a lot of crimes, there are victims, and victims are very important. And we have to remember that we have to fight for them. Think about the crimes that are done to young children. The last couple of years, we have seen some horrific murders of, toddlers and babies. Those poor children never had a chance. And, that's why we do what we do. We have to get them justice. We have to get, whoever's, unfortunately, we've seen too many murders. We've dealt with, unfortunately, too many families who have suffered this horrendous loss. But, we have to make sure that we can bring justice to them.
And what you're saying is speak up.
Yeah. Your voice needs to be heard. Because maybe if everyone's voices, are heard, and they're sending the resounding message that, victims are important too, then maybe there will be change.
Mm. Well, I mean, after all these years that you've done this, there's got to be some cases that you look back on and been particularly rewarding for you, successes. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. First I would say that all of the homicide cases that I've dealt with over the last, course of my career, they were all equally important. And I could name every single one of the victims. I could tell you about their lives. I can tell you about their families, and I can tell you about the circumstances surrounding their death. And it's a privilege for me to be their advocate in the courtroom and make sure that I'm giving justice to their families. A couple of years ago, I had the privilege of prosecuting an individual who murdered a Rochester police officer, Daryl Pearson. And, that was just overwhelming for me. The support from law enforcement, the support from the community, and I was able to secure justice, for the community. And I thought, thank God I'll never, ever have to prosecute, the murder of a police officer again, because it was just so overwhelming and so devastating to our community. But, what happened last summer? Officer Mazurkowitz was, murdered. And, I'm handling that prosecution as well. I never thought that we would be in the place where we would see yet another police officer murdered in the line of duty. It's tragic. Even before that, Officer Denny Wright, who's a dear friend of mine. Denny and I go way back. At one point, Denny was, before he became a member of law enforcement, he was a paralegal in the DA's office. And, I've always had a special place in my heart for Denny. But everyone, knows what happened to him. He responded to a call for assistance, and he was brutally stabbed in his eyes by Keith Williams, who has since been, convicted and sent to state prison. And, Denny's life has changed, forever. He lost his sight in both eyes. It just brings it all home. I mean, the assault on law enforcement that we're seeing in our community, it needs to stop. But as long as, I'm the DA, I will make sure that, we are bringing justice to each and every one of those officers, in the courtroom.
We have 1 minute left.
It is the most rewarding profession that I think anyone could ever enter into. I've got, 2 daughters. One is in law school. One is, I hope, going to law school. And they've grown up, they've seen me do it, and they know just how important it is to be a prosecutor and to bring justice to victims' families and to really work with public safety.
Well, it sounds like at the end of the day, you go home and you have some satisfaction that you've made a difference.
I do. Yeah, it's the best career that I ever could have chosen for myself.
Well, thank you for coming in. It's been a delight getting to know you a little better. And next time we've got to do it a little more frequently than 200 shows later.
Sounds good. It's a date.
Okay. Next week, same time, same place. No Nonsense Roundtable, 10 to 11, right here on News Radio M 1180. Well, thanks for watching this YouTube. If you liked it, please like and share.